The sun had just dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The air was calm, filled with the smell of freshly watered soil. Birds were flying back to their nests, and the crickets had started their evening song. In this peaceful setting, John Miller, a middle-aged farmer, closed the wooden gate of his small farmhouse. He had spent the whole day tending to his land. For him, the garden was not only his food source, but also his pride and joy. John's garden stretched across a good part of the field, rows upon rows of vegetables growing in neat lines. Tomatoes, carrots, beans, and corn stood strong, their leaves whispering in the cool breeze. Farming was hard work, but John never complained. He liked the rhythm of planting, watering, and harvesting. It made him feel alive, connected to the Yao, earth in a way that machines and cities could never give. That evening, as he leaned against his porch rail with a glass of water in hand, something unusual caught his attention. A faint rustling came from the far end of the garden. John frowned. He knew the sound of wind in the crops, but this was different, heavier, almost like footsteps. Raccoons again? He muttered to himself, setting down his glass. He grabbed his flashlight, the same one he always used when he had to chase away animals at night. Raccoons, deer, sometimes even wild dogs came around, drawn by the smell of fresh vegetables. John walked across the yard, his boots pressing softly against the dirt. The sound grew clearer, leaves moving, something pulling at them. His grip tightened on the flashlight as he reached the garden fence. Then he saw it. At first, his mind refused to believe what his eyes were showing him. A figure was crouched among the tomatoes. Not an animal, not a person, something in between. The figure was thin, with limbs too long for a human body, and its skin shimmered faintly in the fading light, like pale silver under the moon. The head turned toward him, and he saw large, dark eyes, deeper and rounder than any he had ever seen. For a second, John froze. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. Instinct told him to shout, to scare it away, maybe even run back to the house, and lock the doors. Yet something about the figure kept him rooted to the spot. The creature stood up slowly, clutching a handful of carrots and tomatoes. It was small, shorter than John had expected, maybe the height of a child. The silver skin glistened with sweat, and the creature's breathing was shallow, almost trembling. Then, with a voice that was strange, yet soft, the figure spoke. "Please. Forgive me." John blinked in shock. The words were clear, though the accent was unusual, broken, as if the speaker had only recently learned them. He raised his flashlight higher, and the beam revealed what he had missed before. The figure was a woman, alien in shape, yes, but there was no mistaking the desperate look on her face, the way her thin hands clutched the vegetables as if they were treasure. The woman's large eyes filled with tears. She dropped to her knees right there in the dirt. The vegetables rolled from her hands, scattering on the ground. "My children are hungry," she whispered. "I beg you." John felt his breath catch in his throat. His fear slowly turned into something else, confusion, pity, and a strange sense of responsibility. He lowered the flashlight a little, the harsh light now softer on her face. For a long moment, the two of them stayed frozen in silence, a farmer with a tool in his hand and a strange woman from the stars kneeling in his garden. John's mind raced. What was she? Where had she come from? Should he call the police, the government, anyone? But when he looked at her, all those questions faded into the background. What remained was the raw truth of her words. Children hungry, a mother desperate, enough to steal food from a stranger. "You're not from here, are you?" John finally said, his voice unsteady. The woman shook her head slowly. "Not from here. Shipbroken. Family hiding." She pressed her hand against her chest as if to prove her honesty. "No food, children weak, please, only little." John's throat tightened. She wasn't threatening him, she wasn't here to harm, she was just asking. He bent down, picked up one of the tomatoes that had fallen, and handed it back to her. She looked at him in disbelief, as if the small act was the greatest kindness she had ever seen. Her long fingers trembled as she took it. I don't know what to say, John murmured. He rubbed the back of his neck. This isn't something I ever thought I'd see. The alien woman clutched the tomato close to her chest. I thank you, she said, her voice heavy with emotion. John stood quietly, his flashlight dangling by his side now. He watched her carefully. She was frail, her skin dull where it had once glowed, her posture weak. She was not dangerous. At least, not in this state. She looked more like a refugee than an invader. Against all his instincts, John found himself softening. Maybe it was because he had grown up poor, remembering the days when his own family struggled for food. Maybe it was simply the way she begged, not for herself, but for her children. He sighed deeply. All right, he said at last. Come with me. The woman looked startled. She glanced toward the dark fields, as if torn between fear and hope. You said your children are hungry. If that's true, I can spare some food. But you need to tell me everything. Her eyes widened, shimmering again with tears. She nodded quickly, almost too quickly, as though afraid he might change his mind. John led her back toward the farmhouse. His steps were heavy, his mind full of doubts. Was he making a mistake? Should he even be doing this? But when he glanced back and saw her struggling to keep up, holding the tomato close as if it were life itself, he knew his decision was already made. The night grew darker, stars shining above like tiny, watchful eyes. For John Miller, an ordinary farmer, everything had changed in the span of a single evening. He had caught a thief in his garden. Not a raccoon, not a neighbor, but a poor alien woman begging for food. And as he opened the farmhouse door, he realized this was only the beginning. The wooden door creaked as John pushed it open. His farmhouse smelled faintly of wood smoke and herbs, a warm contrast to the cool night air outside. He stepped aside and motioned for the alien woman to enter. She hesitated at the threshold, her large dark eyes scanning the small but tidy room as if unsure she was allowed inside. Come on, John said quietly. You look like you're about to fall over. Slowly, almost fearfully, she stepped in. Her thin body moved stiffly, and her head turned left and right, studying the shelves, the table, the lantern hanging from the ceiling. It was as if she was memorizing every detail, or perhaps making sure it wasn't a trap. John closed the door behind them. His dog, Max, a friendly old shepherd, lifted his head from his blanket in the corner and gave a soft bark. The woman flinched and stepped back. It's all right, John said quickly, patting the dog. He won't hurt you. Max tilted his head, sniffed the air, then lay back down as if deciding the strange guest wasn't a threat. The woman watched carefully until she was certain the animal would not attack. John went to the cupboard and pulled out a basket of bread and fruit he had kept from the morning's market. He placed it on the table and nodded toward it. Sit, he said. She approached slowly, her movements uncertain. When she sat down, her posture was stiff, her long fingers twisting together nervously. John placed the bread in front of her. She stared at it, almost disbelieving. Go on, he encouraged. She reached out carefully, broke off a small piece and placed it in her mouth. For a moment, her eyes closed. Relief spread across her face as she chewed. She ate another piece, then another, faster this time, as though afraid the food would disappear if she didn't hurry. Easy, John said softly. There's enough. Her pace slowed, but the gratitude in her eyes grew stronger. When she swallowed the last piece, she looked at him and placed her hand over her chest. Thank you, she whispered. John pulled out a chair and sat across from her. He folded his arms on the table. Now, you need to tell me who you are and what you're doing in my garden. The woman lowered her gaze. For a while she seemed to struggle for words. Her voice, when it came, was halting but clear enough to understand. My name is Lyra, she said. I come from far, too far. My people, we traveled. Our ship broke, fell, near here, hidden in forest. John leaned forward. Your family. Is there? She nodded quickly. Yes, my children. 2. Small, hungry. We have nothing. We cannot fix ship. We cannot leave. We are hiding. If found, we fear. Her eyes filled with tears again. I only wanted food, just a little. I am sorry. John sat back in his chair. His mind swirled with questions. Was she telling the truth? Was this some trick? And if it wasn't, what did it mean for him? He was just a farmer, not a soldier, not a scientist. What was he supposed to do with stranded aliens? Yet when he looked at her again, he didn't see danger. He saw a mother. Her shoulders were hunched with worry, her hands trembling from weakness. Her voice carried the same tone he had once heard from his own mother, long ago, when food was scarce and she worried for her children. You risked coming here, John said slowly. Why me? Why not go to the town, or the police? Lyra shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. No, we cannot. If humans know, maybe, they will hurt us, or take us. We do not know if safe. John rubbed his chin. He had to admit she had a point. Governments would not simply welcome aliens and let them live quietly. They would be taken away, studied, maybe even locked up. And if they were as weak as Lyra seemed, they wouldn't survive long. Still, the risk to him was great. If anyone found out he was hiding them, what would happen? Neighbors talked, authorities asked questions, and yet, could he really turn her away? John stood and walked to the window. Outside, the moonlight shone on his garden, the neat rows glowing faintly. He had worked hard to grow that food, but he had enough, more than enough for himself. Behind him, he heard Lyra whisper again, her voice trembling. Please, my children. They are small, they cannot wait, they are so hungry. John closed his eyes. The sound of her plea struck something deep in him. He remembered his father telling him during the hardest winters that a man was measured not by what he kept, but by what he gave when others had nothing. He turned back, sighing. All right. You and your family won't go hungry. Not if I can help it. Lyra looked up, her eyes wide. You help? Yes, John said firmly. I'll give you food. But you have to be careful. No one can know, not yet. Do you understand? She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. I understand. We stay hidden. We not bring trouble. John sat back down. Tomorrow I'll bring some supplies to where you're hiding. You'll show me where. But tonight, you should rest a little before you go back. For the first time, a faint smile touched Lyra's lips. It was small, fragile, but full of gratitude. You are kind, she said softly. Your heart, strong. John felt a strange warmth in his chest. He wasn't used to being called kind or strong. He was just a farmer living quietly on his land. Yet somehow, fate had chosen him to be the one this alien woman begged for help. The clock on the wall ticked slowly as they sat in silence. John poured her some water and she drank it eagerly. Her hands still shook, but less now. The food had given her a little strength back. Finally, she stood, clutching the edge of the table. I must go. Children wait. John nodded. All right, but take this with you. He packed a small basket with bread, apples, and a few vegetables from his pantry. He handed it to her. She hesitated, almost overwhelmed. This is too much. No, John said firmly. It's not enough, but it will help until tomorrow. Her eyes shone as she accepted the basket. I will not forget. My children will not forget. John walked her to the door. The night was quiet again, stars bright above. As she stepped outside, she turned once more to look at him. You gave life, she said softly. Where there was none. Then she disappeared into the darkness, moving quickly toward the distant forest. John stood on the porch long after she was gone, staring at the stars. He wondered what he had just done, what path he had stepped onto. The world beyond his farm had always felt distant, but now it had come straight into his garden. He knew tomorrow would bring more questions, more choices. But for now he felt a quiet certainty. He had done the right thing. And somewhere out in the forest, a mother would feed her children tonight because of him. The next morning, John rose early, as he always did. The sun had not yet climbed over the hills, but the sky was already lightening with shades of gray and gold. He boiled water for tea and sat by the window, staring at the fields outside. Normally, his mornings were quiet, predictable, but today his thoughts circled around one thing: the alien woman, Lyra, and her family hidden in the forest. He had promised to bring them food. More than that, he had promised to see where they lived. The weight of that promise pressed heavily on him. After a quick breakfast, he filled a sturdy basket with bread, carrots, beans, and a jug of clean water. He also tucked in a few blankets from the storage chest. If her children were as weak as she had said, they would need warmth as much as food. Max, his dog, followed him to the gate, wagging his tail. "Not this time, boy," John murmured, patting his head. "I have to go alone." The forest lay a mile from the farm. John walked steadily, the basket balanced against his hip. The morning air was fresh, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. Yet with each step, unease grew inside him. What if this was a trap? What if Lyra's story was only half true? He shook the thought away. Her eyes, her trembling voice, those had been real. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, the sun had risen, throwing spears of light through the branches. The forest was quiet, except for the chirping of small birds. "Lyra," John called softly, looking around. "It's me." At first, nothing stirred. Then from between the trees she appeared. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the morning light. She looked stronger than the night before, though still thin and tired. "You came," she said, her voice low with relief. "I said I would," John replied, lifting the basket. "I brought food." Her eyes lit up. "Come. Please." She led him deeper into the forest. The path was narrow, roots and stones jutting from the ground. Finally, they reached a small clearing. There, half hidden under branches and leaves, was a broken structure. It was not like any building John had seen before. The metal was curved, smooth, and bent, as if crushed by some great force. The remains of a ship. Beside it, on a bed of leaves, two small figures lay, children. Their bodies were thin, their skin the same silver shade as their mother's, though dull and pale from weakness. One stirred weakly, while the other barely moved. John felt a lump rise in his throat. They looked fragile, as if a strong wind might break them. Lyra hurried to them, kneeling beside the smallest child. She touched its face gently, then looked up at John. "This is my son, Ren, and this my daughter, Sira." The boy lifted his head slightly, his large eyes focusing on John. The girl coughed softly, her body shaking. John set down the basket quickly. "Here, eat. They need strength." Lyra helped her children sit up. She offered them small pieces of bread and slices of carrot. The children ate slowly at first, then with more hunger, though their mother made sure they did not eat too fast. Their eyes brightened a little as food entered their bodies. John knelt beside them, watching quietly. The simple act of seeing children eat, children who had been starving, filled him with a deep ache. He had thought of them as aliens, strangers from the stars. But now, watching them, he saw something universal. The hunger of children, the love of a mother. When they finished, Lyra looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You saved them," she whispered. John shook his head. "No, just gave them what they needed. But food runs out. You need more than this." She lowered her gaze. "We cannot make food. We do not know how, not here." She gestured to the broken ship. "We had machines. They made food for us, but machines are broken. We cannot fix. We cannot grow. This world is strange." John thought, for a moment. "You don't know how to farm?" Lyra frowned, confused. "Farm? Grow food," John explained. "From the soil, with seeds, water, and care. She shook her head slowly. We do not know. We never needed. Machines gave us everything. John leaned back, astonished. To him, farming was as natural as breathing. To her people, it was unknown. Maybe that's why you're struggling, he said firmly. You can't rely on machines here. But this land, he gestured around them. This land can give you life if you work with it. Lyra listened, intently, her eyes wide. You can teach? John hesitated. Teaching farming to aliens? It sounded absurd. Yet when he looked at the children again, weak but alive, he knew he had no choice. Yes, he said at last, I can teach. Over the next hour, he showed them the contents of the basket not just as food, but as examples. He cut open a tomato, showing the seeds inside. These can grow into more plants, he explained. He pulled out a carrot, showing how it grew beneath the soil. He used a stick to draw pictures in the dirt, explaining roots, stems, leaves. Lyra and her children listened closely, their faces a mixture of wonder and disbelief. To them, it was like magic. Life, springing from simple soil, multiplied through patience and care. You humans. You take from the ground and it gives back, Lyra whispered. That's right, John said. But only if you respect it. Work hard, tend it, and it rewards you. The children leaned forward, their eyes shining for the first time since he'd met them. John stood. Tomorrow I'll bring seeds. We'll find a place near here to plant. It won't be easy, but it's better than starving. Lyra bowed her head deeply. We will learn. We will work. John felt a quiet pride rise in him. He was no hero, no leader, but he could do this. He could teach them to live. Before he left, he handed Lyra one of the blankets. She wrapped it around her children, her expression soft with gratitude. You give us more than food, she said. You give us hope. John nodded. Hope's worth more than bread sometimes. As he walked back to his farm, the weight in, his chest felt lighter. He had seen their struggle, and now he had a plan. They didn't just need handouts, they needed knowledge. And that he could give. The forest grew quiet behind him, but in his mind he could still see their faces, fragile yet determined, hungry yet alive. He realized then that humanity's greatest strength was not power or machines, but the simple ability to nurture life from the earth. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the gift his kind could offer the stars. The days passed quietly at first. John balanced his life between tending his own farm and secretly helping Lyra's family in the forest. Each morning, after caring for his animals and watering his garden, he would gather a small bag of supplies and walk to the clearing where the broken ship lay hidden. There he taught them how to plant seeds in soft earth. He showed them how deep to dig, how to cover the seeds gently, and how much water to pour. The alien children, Ren and Sira, followed every movement with wide, curious eyes. Lyra worked beside them, her long fingers careful and precise, though clumsy at first. It will take time, John explained one afternoon as he leaned on his shovel. The plants don't grow in a day, but if you care for them, they'll give you food again and again. Ren tilted his head. The ground makes food, John smiled. Yes, with patience. To him it was simple. To them it was a miracle. But while the forest remained calm, outside whispers began to spread. One evening, as John stopped at the local store for supplies, he overheard two neighbors talking near the counter. Strange lights in the woods last week, one man said. Could be hunters, or something else. Yeah, the other replied. And old Mrs. Taylor swears she saw shadows moving near the creek at night. Folks are saying strangers might be camping out there. John kept his face calm as he paid for his goods, but inside his stomach tightened. People were noticing. If the talk grew louder, it wouldn't be long before someone came searching. That night, he sat on his porch, staring at the stars. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. If humans know, maybe they will hurt us. He understood now why she had begged him, why she had hidden. The world was not ready, and so he would keep their secret, no matter the cost. The real test came only days later. It began with heavy clouds rolling in from the west. By afternoon, the sky was dark, and the wind carried the sharp scent of rain. John stood in his field studying the horizon. He knew storms. He had seen what they could do: floods that drowned seedlings, winds that snapped stalks in half. Evening. The storm arrived. Rain poured in thick sheets, hammering the soil. Thunder rolled across the hills and lightning lit up the night sky. John grabbed his coat and ran outside. His garden, the work of months, was already flooding. Small rivers formed between the rows, washing away loose soil. If the water kept rising, the young plants and the seeds he had given to Lyra's family in the forest would be destroyed. He worked through the night, his boots sinking in mud as he dug trenches with his shovel. Water soaked his clothes, plastering his hair to his forehead, but he did not stop. His muscles burned, his arms ached, yet he kept going, carving channels for the water to escape. At one point, lightning struck so close that the ground shook beneath his feet. Still, he pressed on. Lyra appeared suddenly, her silver skin shining faintly in the rain. She had run from the forest with Ren and Sira close behind, their eyes wide with fear. "You fight the storm?" she shouted over the thunder. John wiped the rain from his face. "If I don't, the crops will drown, yours too." Without hesitation, Lyra dropped to her knees in the mud and began digging beside him with her bare hands. The children followed, scooping mud and stones, trying to help in their small way. Together they worked through the pounding rain. John showed them how to shape the trenches, so the water flowed away from the plants instead of toward them. The storm raged, but their efforts slowly made a difference. Water began to drain, the seedlings steadied. Hours passed before the rain finally eased. The storm rolled east, leaving behind broken branches and soaked fields. John collapsed on the wet ground, chest heaving. His hands were blistered, his clothes soaked, but his garden still stood. Beside him, Lyra and her children sat in silence, staring at the plants that had survived. "You fought the sky," Ren whispered, amazement in his voice. John gave a tired laugh. "Not the sky, just the water. Sometimes you can't fight it, but you can guide it." Lyra looked at him with wide, shining eyes. "You did not give up, even when it was hopeless." John leaned back against his shovel. "That's farming. That's being human, I guess. You keep going no matter what." For a long time, none of them spoke. The night air was cool now, filled with the fresh smell of wet earth. In the silence, trust grew stronger between them. Next day, when John returned to the village for more supplies, the whispers had grown louder. "Tracks in the forest," someone said. "Not human tracks either. Maybe poachers, maybe worse." The sheriff stopped John as he loaded bags of seed into his truck. "Miller, you seen anything strange near your land?" "Folks are nervous." John kept his expression calm, though. His heart pounded. "Nothing but raccoons," he said simply. The sheriff studied him for a moment, then nodded and walked away. That night, as John sat with Lyra and her children in the forest, he told them of the danger. "People are suspicious. They'll come looking soon. You need to stay hidden more than ever." Lyra bowed her head. "You risk much for us." John shook his head. "It's not about risk. It's about what's right. You're not enemies. You're just people, same as us. Hungry people, and I won't let them take that from you." Ren crawled closer, his small hands clutching John's sleeve. "You protect us, like a father." The words struck John deeply. He had never had children of his own, but in that moment, he felt the weight of responsibility more strongly than ever. He looked at Lyra, who met his gaze with quiet strength. "Trust goes both ways," he said. "I'll keep your secret, but you have to trust me too. No more stealing from the garden. If you need food, you ask." She nodded. "I promise." The storm had tested more than crops. It had tested loyalty, trust, and courage, and in the end, they had stood together, humans and aliens, not as strangers, but as a family bound by struggle. As John walked back to his farm under the starlit sky, he realized something profound. The storm had nearly destroyed them, Yet it had also revealed their strength. It was not the machines of the past or the power of the future that mattered. It was the will to fight for life, even in mud and rain. And that, John thought, was what made humans different. The weeks after the great storm passed quietly, but John felt tension in the air like a rope pulled too tight. The crops he had worked so hard to save began to grow again, their green leaves pushing through the soil with new strength. Lyra and her children tended to their hidden patch in the forest, learning slowly how to care for seedlings. Every evening John visited them, carrying tools or extra food. He showed Wren how to hold a watering can, how to check the soil for dryness, how to pull weeds without harming the plants. He showed Sira how to tie young stalks to sticks so they would grow straight and strong. The children laughed sometimes, now their weak voices gaining life, their eyes brighter each day. Lyra often stood back, watching silently. Her face was full of wonder, as if every small sprout breaking from the soil was a miracle. "You change us," she told John one evening as the children chased fireflies around the clearing. "We were only surviving. Now, we are living." John shrugged, though a quiet pride warmed his chest. "I just showed you what my father showed me. The earth does the rest." But outside their hidden life, the village grew restless. Rumors spread faster than weeds. Strange tracks in the woods, odd lights at night. Some whispered of outsiders, others of dangerous things better left alone. One afternoon, Sheriff Daniels came to John's farm. His truck rattled up the dirt road, dust clouding behind him. John was in the field, mending a fence post when he saw the sheriff climb out. "Miller," the sheriff said, adjusting his hat. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" John set down his hammer slowly. "Go ahead." "Some of the folks are worried," the sheriff continued. "They say someone's been living out in the forest. Hunters saw smoke, found footprints too, small to be a man's. You sure you haven't seen anything strange?" John felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his voice steady. "Sheriff, you know me. I've worked this land all my life. Only things I've seen are raccoons stealing corn and my dog chasing rabbits." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, he nodded. "All right, just keep your eyes open. If you see anything, let me know." "I will," John said. When the sheriff left, John stood alone in his field, heart heavy. The danger was closer now. One wrong step, one careless word, and Lyra's family would be discovered. That night he told them what had happened. Lyra's hands trembled as she pulled her children close. "We cannot stay. They will find us." John shook his head firmly. "Not yet. Your crops are growing. You're stronger now than when I found you. If you leave too soon, you'll only suffer again. You need to hold on a little longer." Lyra looked at him, torn between fear and trust. "Why do you risk so much? They are your people. If they find us, they will blame you." John met her gaze without flinching. "Because it's the right thing to do. You're not enemies, you're just a mother and children who needed help, that's all I see." Her eyes softened, shining with unspoken gratitude. Days turned into weeks. The crops in the forest patch grew taller. Tiny green tomatoes appeared on vines, beans curled around sticks, and carrots thickened under the soil. Wren and Sira worked eagerly, their laughter filling the clearing. Then one evening, as John prepared to leave, Lyra stopped him. "We will not forget," she said quietly. "Your people may see us as strangers, but you did not. You gave us food, strength, hope. My children will carry this in their hearts. One day when we find a way home, we will tell our people what we learned here." John tilted his head. "And what's that?" "That humans are special," Lyra answered softly. "Not because of machines, not because of power, but because you fight for life. You give when you have enough. You stand when others would fall. That is why you are strong." Her words struck John deeply. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a farmer, a man who worked the soil and tended his land. Yet in her eyes, that simple life had become something extraordinary. The summer drew on. By late season, the forest garden was ready for its first harvest. Lyra and her children pulled carrots from the ground, their faces glowing with joy. They picked beans and tomatoes, filling baskets with the fruits of their work. For the first time since John had met them, they had food that was truly their own. "This is ours," Wren said proudly, holding up a carrot. "Yes," John said, with a smile. "Yours. You grew it." Lyra's eyes shone with tears as she watched her children eat food they had planted themselves. But fate was never far away. That same evening, as John walked back to his farm, he noticed lanterns flickering in the distance. A group of men with dogs were moving toward the forest, voices carrying in the night. His heart raced. They were searching. John hurried back to the clearing, breathless. "You have to go," he told Lyra. "Now. They're coming." Lyra clutched the basket of vegetables, fear flashing in her eyes. "But where? We have no ship." John thought quickly. "There's an old storm shelter near my land. No one uses it. Stay there until it's safe. I'll bring you food." They moved quickly, carrying what they could. The children followed close, their small hands clutching John's coat. Under the cover of night, he led them across fields until they reached the shelter, a hidden door in the ground, long unused but sturdy. Inside it was dark and cold but safe. "Stay here," John whispered. "I'll keep them away." Lyra reached out, her hand brushing his. "You risk everything." "Why?" John smiled faintly. "Because once, when I was a boy, my family was hungry, and someone gave us food. I never forgot. Now it's my turn." Her eyes filled with tears. "You are more than farmer. You are hope." The searchers never found them. Days later, the talk died down, and the men returned to their lives. Lyra's family remained safe, hidden but alive. By the end of the season, the aliens had regained their strength. The children no longer looked frail. Their eyes shone with health. Their garden thrived, and the storm shelter became a safe home, for the time being. On a clear night, under the wide sky filled with stars, Lyra stood beside John at the edge of the field. "One day," she said softly, "we will leave. We will find our way back to the stars. But we will carry Earth with us, your kindness, your strength, your soil that gives life. This is the gift of humans, and we will tell it to all who listen." John nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "That's enough for me." The crickets sang in the grass and the stars burned bright above them. John knew he was only a farmer, but in his heart, he felt something larger. Humanity's greatness was not in power or conquest. It was in compassion, in resilience, in the simple act of feeding the hungry, even strangers from the stars. And somewhere far into the future, Lyra's children would remember. They would tell their people, and perhaps even the galaxy, of a man who shared his garden and fought storms with bare hands, of a farmer who proved that humans, though small among the stars, carried a gift no machine could ever replace, the gift of hope.